Hello everyone, this is Super Spiky Shell. We need to talk about Super Mario 64, the most unrefined 3D Mario game ever. In my last video, I ranked every single course to discuss how the game's levels range in quality. But today, I'm going to talk about how everything else in this game stands. Today, I am doing an official game review, which means I am going to go in depth on every single topic I can think of before deciding my overall take of this game as to why it hasn't aged well in my opinion. Now, keep in mind that everything I say is based off my own opinion unless I occasionally state objective results. You may disagree with the stuff I talk about, and that's fine, but please be respectful about it. Also, I'm going to get critical with certain attributes, but just because I talk about the negatives and even get heated about some, doesn't automatically mean hate. I don't even consider Super Mario 64 to be a bad game. I just don't think it's nearly as good as certain future installments, which is what I mean by isn't that good. And it's not just me, there are plenty of people giving this game a bad rep for its jank, so this shouldn't be too controversial. Another thing is that everything I talk about will be exclusive to this version and not the DS remake, as I do not own that version and can't really play it. Before I begin this review, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, as it supports me and encourages me to make more content. Without further ado, let's get on with Mario 64. So, my first order of business is the gameplay, the most important aspect of any video game ever, because if it's not well designed, then the game isn't very good. And this especially applies to the controls and camera positioning, because Super Mario 64's gameplay is shit. Normally in 3D games, Mario can just easily move left, right, forward, or down, and easily change direction with the flick of the joystick. But in Mario 64, his movement is so stiff and heavy. If you want to go in any direction, you have to move very slowly or else you'll slip. And turning around is taking a U-turn. This doesn't look so bad by default, but it makes walking on narrow platforms way harder than they should be. Jumping isn't much more refined because instead of a simple jump, Mario slips even more when landing, and depending on the height, can cause even more slipping. Also, double and triple jumping is bad too, because those are done by perfectly timing your jumps in a row, but with unrefined controls, it's especially harder to time yourself. And that's just part of it. Wall jumping is also bad because unlike most games where you can just hold next to a wall and press A or B off of it, you cannot do that in 64 when falling. So you can only jump once and then once again have to precisely time yourself for every additional jump or else you have to start over completely. Long jumping is also way too hard because you jump way further than in most games, and if you're not careful, you can land in places you shouldn't be anywhere near. Sometimes if you're lucky, you can skip platforms completely, but if your movement isn't handled correctly while doing it, it's more optimal not to long jump. Also, you can take fall damage in this game, so never mind falling into lava or void, even high places are dangerous. Although for that one, you can just press Y right before landing to break a fall. And it's not even just running or jumping, pretty much everything here is full of jank. If an enemy hits you or an object pushes you, you can get knocked back several meters out of the way and sometimes fall off completely. Punching and kicking is a cool concept that no other 3D game really lets you do, but you can't stay still when doing it. Swimming is bad because if you're holding the joystick up, the game can't figure out if you're going forward or upward, and turning it can send you in a whole nother direction. It's also really slow, so avoiding enemies or grabbing objects could also be annoying. And for what I said about forward or upward, yeah, that makes getting out of water painful because you can't just hop out easily. You have to hold the joystick up or be next to a platform, and sometimes that won't even work. Also, your air meter is the same as your HP, so if you take damage while underwater with no coins nearby, well, you're in absolute trouble. But it also means that you can heal when on top of water, which also means you can regain health when swimming in water if there is any. Also, ground pound is slower than other games, and you have to press harder to do it. However, the controls are not the main problem, because the camera positioning is also what gives this game some more flack. Slippery, janky controls are bad enough, but the camera really hurts this game. The positioning of it is to see where Mario is when moving around and without too much of a struggle. But the problem is that the camera doesn't want to be on center. Not only that, but some areas don't let you adjust it or change its direction when it's most needed. And sometimes the camera automatically adjusts itself when moving with little or no control over it. And sometimes it chooses to zoom in or zoom out. Like, what? Is this game not hard enough already? And I know you can change camera positioning by pressing the right bumper, but that zooms in too much and can be very hard to walk around as. And even if you then press down to see yourself perfectly, there are less surroundings to notice in plain sight. And sometimes even that doesn't help with the issues. And it's not even much of a skill issue considering how badly these are designed. No other 3D game is full of this much jank except Super Mario Sunshine, but even that game has only half the issues I brought up. Now, not all of it is bad. Some of this jank can be so bad it's good once you get used to it, making some of the levels fun to master if you've figured out how to handle the controls, but other levels are an absolute chore to play, and practicing them is a nightmare, which kills my incentive to get better. Because once I get used to its difficulty and beat the levels, well, I'm done and won't have to do it again until my next playthrough. But some of these levels have been more tolerable with these bad controls in some of my subsequent playthroughs. However, that's just the general gameplay. We still have a lot more to talk about, with next being the game's unrefined mechanics. I've talked about a bunch of these mechanics in my course ranking video, but I will recap on some and also touch upon ones I haven't mentioned. First of all, the enemies function badly. Not all of them are unfun to deal with, but some are due to how they're designed. The heave-ho enemies give you a boost if you're on its lift, but it can also launch you where you don't want to be, and be hard to get out of its way. The chuck-ya is annoying because it can grab you, and also launch you where you shouldn't go, and can't even be used as a tool like the other one in Wet Dry World. The fireball shooter is especially bad because it can shoot fireballs at you, and dodging them can be almost impossible. Now, all the other ones aren't so bad. They're usually fun obstacles or challenges in certain areas, unless they're placed in unfair spots. Rolling balls can be a fun hazard, but if there's little room to dodge them, they can also be a nightmare because you have to timely jump over them when they keep coming, and waiting for when there's none can be luck-based. And it's not just enemies. Any hazards can be frustrating if not well designed. Just ask the moving objects in TikTok Clock. If shifting platforms or moving hazards are blocking you, you'll need a minute or two to assess them before going forward. But some areas don't give you that time because if you take too long, you'll fall off. In a more fair game, it's optimal to stay on your toes when dealing with non-stop difficulty. But if you're dealing with bad controls at the same time, that kills the fun and just becomes a chore. And that's not even the worst part about this game's mechanics. Don't like dealing with enemies or hazards in already high-risk areas? Well, what about pushing wind gusts? Yeah, Super Mario 64 decided to add random wind in some of these levels, pushing you in a certain direction. And half the time, it's just to add annoyance in an area, while other times, it doesn't do a fully good job helping you when you need it. It also doesn't give you any indicator where the wind could be or come from, so half the time, you'll be taken by surprise. And what about fire and lava? In this game, if Mario touches it, Mario will jump up and uncontrollably run forward while burning. And while that also happens in Galaxy and Odyssey, it's more pronounced in 64 because the poor controls make it harder to hold downward or jump repeatedly to avoid getting too far forward. Even regular fire objects such as flamethrowers and, as I said, fireball shooters. So if you catch fire on moving or small platforms, you'll most likely never survive that because of how easy it is to fall off. And the game decided to put those in areas where it's more frustrating to dodge them. But what about all the other simpler mechanics? Yeah, most of them aren't much better. Pole jumping is another gameplay mechanic that isn't well designed. You have to make sure your camera is properly adjusted, and I've stated that sometimes it can't be. So it's easy to send yourself flying where you shouldn't go. And for some reason, Mario does 360s when going downward on a pole, which can screw up your positioning if you're too high, and turning to a different direction is very slow. Cannons are less bad because they do the job nicely, shooting yourself into another area, but they still don't entirely function well. Wherever you aim, the game decides to shoot you in a curvature downward, so you have to aim higher than you're landing, but if you aim too high, you can shoot yourself off too far. Also, when you land, you end up slipping a little or a lot, so you fall off the platform you're trying to reach unless you hit a pole or wall. However, it's more fun to master than several of these other gameplay quirks. And I like that in order to use a cannon, you have to find Red Bob-omb to activate one, and then you can use it. But some levels put him in an unnecessary spot, making this more of a hassle. And I guess the other gameplay mechanics aren't so bad they ruin a level, besides one's exclusive to levels that I already mentioned. The only other one I don't like so much is the chest opening one, because those are completely random and you have to figure out which order they need to be opened. But you'll take damage if you get the wrong one, which ruins this otherwise interesting concept. At least Odyssey changed it so it summons enemies instead. But taking damage feels like a punishment for not knowing which order, unless there are nearby coins, and is made worse when they decided to use 2 of these underwater, with one adding an obnoxious hazard that sucks you out of the course. Also, bunny chasing is worse here than in other games because you have to actually position yourself while also being quick, but at least that one is less offensive. The only other thing to talk about is the power-ups. Probably the best part of this game's gameplay mechanics, but even those are flawed in some way. Now, this game has a total of 4 power-ups, with 3 of them being unlockable by finding secret stages that use them and activating a switch. There's the Flying Cap, Invisible Cap, Metal Mario Cap, and the Koopa Shell, which randomly shows up and doesn't have its secret stage. The Invisible Cap is the only flawless one, as that one has you run through some walls or bars and resist enemy attacks. Metal Mario is the best one in my opinion, as it can have you not only avoid any damage, such as general attacks, fire, fall damage, and drowning, but you can even smash enemies just by walking into them and walk underwater rather than swim. But it has the shortest time frame, and he also moves a bit slower and heavier. Now, the other 2 are really flawed ones. Winged Cap is cool because you can fly through an area and possibly skip some obstacles, but you can only activate it by triple jumping, which is a bit much. But he also flies too fast, making reaching a certain platform too hard, and you can fly off course if you're not careful. And the shell? I don't recommend it. It's cool to breeze through certain terrain, and you can go over quicksand and lava, but it goes too fast unless you jump and hold back repeatedly. And if you hit a wall, it breaks. Not only that, but you can accidentally press the left trigger and stop the shell completely. The only thing better about this is that it doesn't have a timer, but otherwise is unoptimal. Also, you can only use it once until you re-enter, so thanks for nothing. Now, just like the controls, you can get used to the gameplay mechanics, even if it takes too much time and pressure. And some can be so bad they end up being good, but it still makes the game a chore to play. And I'm still not done being harsh on this game. We still have levels to talk about. In my last video, I ranked 15 of the main courses, so I'm going to be quick about this one. All of them are ranked divisively from S tier to F tier, and are almost evenly split in each category. First of all, some of the weak courses fall victim to my aforementioned controls and gameplay mechanics. Tick-Tock Clock, one of the most hated levels in this game. It throws as many moving hazards as possible into a bunch of areas, which would have worked as a challenge if the controls were more refined, and you can turn off the difficulty for most of the stars, but then it becomes a cheap challenge. Rainbow Ride, another hated level. Just a slow carpet ride with unnecessary hazards in high-risk areas. Snowman's Land, once again, contains random frustrating elements and bad spots for them, and ones that don't work well with these controls. Tiny Huge Island. Large version also puts hazards in unnecessary spots, and small version is too hard to climb without the risk of slipping off. And another thing, none of these courses have checkpoints except a few particular sub-areas. However, it's not just frustrating difficulty that ruins the levels. Some of the levels are just empty and devoid of substance, and others feel unnatural in design, or contain gimmicks that don't meet their fullest potential. Lethal Lava Land is just a giant lava square with random platforms, and some are more interesting than others, but there's also a volcano to go inside of that contains some frustrating challenges. Wet Dry World is a neat concept of changing water levels dynamically, but the execution is either annoying or just boring, and the background is more interesting than the terrain. Rainbow Ride is supposed to be a castle in the clouds, and that the ship helps the theme stick out more, but the rest is just random platforms, so it's really just a 3D athletic course. Dire Dire Docks, my most hated level. It's just an overbloated shell with no substance besides frustrating elements, and wastes potential on being the theme it wants to be, and even sets us up for disappointment. But not all courses are bad. While some don't look entirely good because of the N64's limitations, some courses really embrace the atmosphere. And while some levels are agonizing, others are more well designed and a lot more fun to master. Bob-omb Battlefield and Whomp's Fortress especially for how packed they are and how they take full advantage of their theme. Shifting Sandland and Big Boo's Haunt are also great, as they have very few frustrating elements and make good use of their level designs. And Tall Tall Mountain, the only good late game level, is also a fun challenge with extreme difficulty because it's more well designed than the other hard levels. However, there are also secret levels and Road to Bowser ones that I haven't ranked on my previous video, and most of them suck ass. The Road to Bowser ones are very difficult and could be fun to master if I didn't have to replay them for making one mistake, and the red coins kind of ruin it. And the Bowser fights are too short, but also very annoying when you have to accurately position yourself. I said in my previous video that Dire Dire Docks soured the mid-game point for being so underwhelming, but without that, it still wouldn't be given a much better impression after realizing how bad all of them are. And there's a total of 3, with 2 giving you a key to unlock new areas and 1 just being a final boss. But what about the other levels? Well, 3 of them use power-ups and introduce them to the game, because you can activate a switch to unlock each cap after completing them, but they also involve red coins that once again ruin it. The winged cap level is a decent introduction to the power-up, but you have only 1 chance to collect the red coins, because there are no high platforms and you can't really fly up, and you have to carefully position yourself not to miss a coin. And what's worse is that this one has a sequel on the other side of Rainbow Ride, which is flying to a bunch of different clouds, and while you get more time and chances, you cannot fall off because then you land outside Peach's castle and have to navigate your way back. And the red coins are even more tedious here than the predecessor level. Besides Dire Dire Docks, this may be the real worst level in the game. The underwater level is boring. It's just a square and just find the red coins. And all the other coins are abundant so you don't have to worry about drowning. It's just a cheap challenge. The invisible cap level is awful. It shows how the cap works, but then it wears off before you're halfway through. And then there's platforms to jump across, but they decide to flip over for some reason. It's another challenge that isn't well designed and doesn't work with this game's controls. The only sub-level I like is the Metal Mario one, as it's a decent introduction and isn't too frustrating, and feels kind of satisfying to walk through the section and avoid or walk through hazards, and is the only secret star found by playing an actual level instead of finding it in the castle. Actually, there's one more, and that's the first slide, which is kind of cool, and you can play it again to beat 21 seconds for another star. Otherwise, they're nothing to write home about. If I had to rank them on my other video, the Road to Bowser ones would be in the D+ tier under Snowman's Land. The first slide would get a low B-, the Metal Mario one would get a high C+, and the rest would be F tier under Dire Dire Docks. Anyways, now that I got all the negatives out of the way, I can talk about everything else. Now the rest shouldn't take nearly as long as this and the previous 2 topics. So the premise of Super Mario 64 is your typical story in Mario games. Princess Peach invites Mario to her castle and bakes him a cake, but Bowser kidnaps her, so now you gotta defeat Bowser and save Peach. Now in this particular 3D game, you enter courses and collect a bunch of power stars, which will help you advance into new levels / territory. There are 7 stars in 15 of the main courses, and you can collect most of them in any order you want, which I really like. Normally in Mario games, you have to beat certain levels in some order, but this one you can collect star 6 before star 1. Now, not every course gives you this freedom of choice and order, as some stars can only be collected after others are got first, and some levels make you collect the first one before some others. But it's still an amazing concept handled really well. You also have to find some stars by exploring the level casually, which incentivizes exploration, rather than every star be a dedicated level with a clear start and clear finish, which I also really like, even if half the missions aren't good at all. Until Odyssey, none of the other 3D games gave you that privilege. And then Odyssey made the concept better as the moons were fairer and more satisfying, and you don't have to restart every time you collect one. Also, there are 6 major stars as official game missions, but there's an extra one in each course which is collecting 100 coins, which was not handled too well. If the coins were abundant and exploring the levels weren't a chore due to the punishing difficulty, it would be far more satisfying to collect 100 coins and earn a star. But because of how coins are spread out and how difficult some are, it takes a long time to get that many in any course. And if you screw it up, you have to start over and do it all again. The only other game that made you do this is Sunshine, and that game had the same issues because it's also full of jank. After that, this feature was never used again in any other 3D games, and all the later ones were more refined so they would possibly work out better. But after every level I had to torture myself in collecting 100 coins, it's probably better not to ever do this again. However, it's not just the 15 main courses, as there are an extra 15 secret stars. One in each Road to Bowser level, which there are 3 of, one in each of the secret stages, which there are 6 of, with 2 in one of them, as I discussed already, and then the rest are scattered throughout the castle, with 3 by finding hidden toads, and 2 by chasing bunnies. Oh, and to enter the courses, you jump in paintings for most of them, but you can hop in holes for several of the secret stages and Rainbow Ride. Some paintings are cleverly hidden, such as Snowman's Land, and Shifting Sand Lands is entirely cryptic with no sign that the wall is the hidden entrance to it. For Big Boo's Haunt, you ground pound a boo and enter the small cage. For the Winged Cap level, you zoom in and look up into the sunroof and then you go inside. Some are obvious to be found, but others are found by looking for secrets, and I kind of like that. And Sunshine carried on the same premise for its levels. And the Bowser ones are activated by a trapdoor. Anyways, now let's talk about the remainder of this game. Alright, this shouldn't take too long. First of all, the music. It's not the best or most memorable music, but it does the job nicely, even if future games have much better music. Some of its music is really good and well developed, some of it is generally passable, and some is boring and forgettable and possibly unfit for the level. It's the first game, so I don't expect much, and I'm less critical about it than the gameplay and course quality. And lastly, the end game. Some games give you an extra world or just extra levels after collecting all the stars or being the final boss, but this one has no post-game content. The only true reward you get is the cannon that takes you to the roof, and it's to explore more of the castle and speak to Yoshi, but nothing more. You don't even get to ride Yoshi, you just speak to him and he'll give you 100 lives. And then you can fly around the outside with Winged Mario, which is pointless because there are no more stars to collect afterwards. And that's your reward for 120 stars. But what about defeating the final boss? Is it worth that? No. The final boss is a bit brutal and occasionally too easy. The Bowser fights are kind of weak, and this is the only fully realized one, but even that still isn't good. You have to accurately position yourself, and Bowser, and it's once again not fun with this game's jank. And you don't even get anything out of it because the credits roll and then you have to restart the game. And it doesn't get added to your star count, so thanks for nothing. Overall, that was all I could think of for Super Mario 64. I apologize in advance for missing anything else, but I think I got everything I needed for this review. And now to conclude this review, Super Mario 64 was the first of many 3D games, and did an acceptable job revolutionizing the series into what we've gotten up to this day. But as the first entry in the series, it's also the most flawed one due to how poorly designed half the game is. Despite its decent charm, I had plenty of issues with this game that hold back some of my enjoyment. But I also learned to get used to this game and tolerate some of the most difficult aspects of it. But I can't bring myself to love it just because it was the first and they had nothing better at the time. It's still the most inconsistent 3D Mario game I played. Overall, I'm gonna give this game a 6 out of 10. I hesitate to say it's good, but its negatives and positives were entirely balanced, so I kind of like this game after all. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm curious to see what you guys think of it so far. Do you love this game? Do you hate it? Or do you have mixed feelings? Let me know in the comments, and otherwise stay tuned for more videos I make, and I will see you in the next one.